some of his men said, George, you should just be king. And he bitch slapped them down so hard it's not even funny. You can read he had articles and he had an article published that laid out from a letter why he didn't want to do this. And then after the revolution is over, Washington shows up in full dress with his sword to the United States Capitol, which was then in Annapolis, Maryland. Mm-hmm. And he walked in with the United States Congress in a room and gave back a ceremonial sword. He quit the army.
What?
Yeah, he quit, thus establishing civilian control of the military forever and all time. Unbelievable.
What?
Right? Why on earth would he want to quit? Well, by quitting, he had a legacy that no other man will ever have. He had power, and he gave it up.
Right.
Amazing. Then he's president unanimously. Twice, 8 years. And at the end of the 8 years, he said, you know what? That's enough. I'm going to go back to my farm now.
Right.
And it's the first time in human history somebody willingly said, you know what? It's been nice, but I no longer want this political power. And his example, giving up the presidency, was so good that everybody did it after the second term until Franklin Roosevelt in the 20th century.
Really?
So this is what you're looking at when you're looking at Washington. He was absolutely a great man. People don't even comprehend how great he was.
Wow.
But he gave up power every time he had the chance. And it became institutionalized immediately thereafter. So Washington didn't say much. Ben Franklin, probably the most famous of all the people in the room, when things got bad and people started yelling at each other, insulting each other, Ben Franklin would draw everybody close and offer a prayer. Why? Because he was the old dude.
Yeah.
He was the guy that everybody thought, well, we got one adult in the room. And when he said, you got to stop this, they did.
They listened, yeah.
Just as you would if you walked into a room with a bunch of young people and one guy in his 70s, right? If you said, look, you're doing this incorrectly, you might actually listen.
Right.
And people did listen to Franklin. And these things emerge as you start reading through the convention notes that Madison took. And it's a beautiful thing, right? The convention was unbelievable, totally high-minded. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, they ratified the Constitution inside the room. And what do? They send it out. They say, well, let's send it to the states. And 9 of 13, if 9 of 13 buy into this, we're going with it. Well, that was against the letter of the law of the Articles of Confederation, which said 13 of 13. But the people who wrote the new one were claiming a much higher authority. They weren't looking at legalisms. They were looking at things that they would more likely consider the natural law, and things that we had to settle as a people, or we were all going to be in real trouble. You can get away with a failed constitution. You couldn't have gotten away with 2. This was the last chance they had.
Right.
And they grabbed it with everything they had. So I think the entire thing is so honorable that it breaks my heart when people don't know anything about it. Right. And what if we've learned that the people who did this were all villains in the American story.
Right.
And that's asinine. Of course they were human beings, and some of them had done pretty horrific things. But they had done, largely speaking, what all the other humans had done.
Right.
Except they were smarter and a little more high-minded.
Right.
Because they were able to put all of what they wanted aside and figure out what would work best.
For the future.
And here we are. And look, I'm not going to make the case that we haven't prostituted the Constitution in every way. We have. Mm-hmm. But that it still exists at all is shocking. It's shocking.
It is fascinating.
If you could bring James Madison back and say, well, what looks weird to you, Jimmy Madison? He would say, but you guys are still using that Constitution we wrote? You got to be shitting me.
Yeah, they're all drunk, just making shit up.
Yeah. And one of these days I'll send you over the bar tab for George Washington's retirement party.
Really?
It's astonishing.
Wow.
It's astonishing. Those fuckers drank more than any group of people ever should have had.